All right. Greetings and welcome back once again. Everybody, thank you for joining us under the palm. I don't know. All praise be to the Most High, the Holy One of creation. For this day, his blessings and mercies upon our soul. We're going to be waiting here a little while for Sister Mayana if you're listening and you would like to chime in. Not sure. Today was a wild day. So I'm not sure how long we're going to rock out, but we're going to come and do a little something and then do what it is that we have to do. So we definitely have a lot of contributions as it relates to our subject matter. And if you have any subject matter that you would like to be discussed, feel free to leave it under the video or leave it on the social media page. So without further ado, today's discussion is supposed to be centered around Israelites and crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips. Among other things, there are oftentimes a difference of opinion as to what is permissible, what should be the behavior, um, what is allowed according to the script, right? And so I'm going to try to wait a little bit for Sister Marana to join us to see if we can talk about this. Let me see if we can get Sister Aisha on the line to talk about this. What are your thoughts while you're waiting? Should Israelites have foul mouths? Should they be cursing or cursing people out or making little gestures on street corners or using their words in such a way to push people away from the Creator? Is this possible, or is there um, an allowance somewhere in the text for this type of behavior? These are some of the questions that we're going to look into in just a little while. I don't have any intro music, so and usually if you do have some intro music, then they'll flag you. So we ain't trying to do all that. But I see Sister Mayana has joined us, so I'll say shalom to Sister Mayana before I read the title and we get into it. Sister Mayana, welcome to the discussion. Thanks for braving the weather to make it here.
Hey, shalom, shalom. You know, I had to show up for work.
You already know. I've been running around today too, so we're gonna try to do what it is we do, and then just leave it at that. Um,
Yeah.
Today's topic, I ended up. I know we were having discussion among other things. We have some things dropped in the box on the Facebook side, but I just named it Israelites: crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips. And so
Mm.
basically, I was asking the listening audience. There are so many scriptures that can be used to justify bad language, profanity. Um, so that's kind of what we're going to look at, some of those scriptures, and see if there's any validity to that, and whether or not this type of behavior is uh, pulling others close to the Creator or pushing them further away. So, what are your thoughts on that? Crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips.
Me?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
got to see. This is about our behavior. We could bang on script all day, but
Yeah.
people are gonna remember how we behave. So this is like, let's be honest. Let's, what I mean. Let's do. There's places in which we the people can improve, but there are also spaces where it doesn't benefit us to justify bad behavior if it's bad behavior.
Nah,
And this
right.
is one of the things. If you go on YouTube and you pull it up, even I gotta be like, you know what I mean? I'm like, what? So go ahead, sister.
Nah, for sure. We like you said, it doesn't really help or it doesn't really work to be versed in scripture or even to have um, an important message to give if that message is sullied by the presentation. And very often people will say, well, why can't you look past the presentation? Why don't you just look at the information? But the fact is that a lot of the information is tied to the presentation. The way you receive something
Mm-hmm.
um, is going to be determined by how it's given, and that's just to not pay attention to the weight of one's words. That's the other thing about it. If you want someone to really appreciate the information, you have to show that you respect the information. And if
Mm.
you are couching, holy text in an unholy tongue, then you have already disrespected the message. You have disrespected the creator. You have disrespected, especially if we're talking about um, that you are saying something on behalf of the creator. As I'm saying this, I'm remembering that I don't want to maybe bring up like a bad memory or some a recent behavior, but without going into detail, I will say this. There was an idea, since we were already introducing the thought that people sometimes use scriptures
Mm-hmm.
to justify certain behaviors, certain tones, and the like. Recently, there was an assertion that being loud, being aggressive, being without provocation, agitated, and and the like, that was something that the prophets did, right? Because I made the assertion that, okay, why is a person being loud all of the time? Like, it's really hard for me to take in something where the person is already agitated, the person is already at 1,000. It's like, okay, it's really hard for me to listen to you right now because I'm trying to understand what's going on with you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm in my head. I'm trying to figure out if you need assistance. So I'm not really paying attention to what you're saying because you look like something else is going on. It's distracting. But anyway, the person made the assertion that, well, the prophets did this cry aloud, and that you're supposed to do all these things, and this is what the Most High had instructed them to do. And again, that's not in context. The most when the prophets cried out, when the prophets cried aloud, when the prophets were loud and proclaiming something, they weren't proclaiming their own feelings. They were proclaiming the words of the Most High. They were trying to get the attention of the people to the creator. But when you do something that draws attention just to you, that's not being like the prophets. The prophets did not cry aloud so that people paid attention to them or wondered if they were okay or wondered if they were like 30 seconds from an aneurysm, because that's what you sound like. That's
Mm.
not what you were screaming for. And that's just talking about, at this point, that's just talking about being just kind of loud and aggressive. Then we have these other parts where people are being, like you said, crude and vulgar and the like. And I know as we have these conversations, we'll look at other examples of why some people might think that's okay to use
I was just
certain
about to
language.
go there. I was just about to go there for you, sis. And we usually invite both sides of the narrative to the conversation because I'm sorry to cut you. I'm gonna give it back to you because what happens is in some places in Torah you don't see it, and then the behavior is often justified by the New Testament. So for
Right.
those reasons, and for what I've heard in times past, I'm gonna touch a little bit of the New Testament today until someone shows up to be like, nah, sis, you're not going into that right. But go ahead. We're gonna go
No,
to
no.
Second Corinthians in a minute.
Now I'm about to say, yo, take that as a segue. Go ahead and alley oop that.
Oh boy, we're about to go on the subway now. I got to take a transfer. We are going to go into Second Corinthians 11. This is Paul. I heard recently, like you said, the person was on the top of their lungs. Melanated people were all type of ninjas. This is real talk, right? On social media, in the purview of everybody to see,
Right.
Israel or not. And you ninjas are this, and you ninjas are that, and cursing out all of the ninjas. And and this scripture was given, and I was all like, okay. So I want to say Chronicles, my part. Second Corinthians 11 was given this particular verse 6. But though I be crude in speech, yet not in knowledge, but we have been thoroughly made manifest among you in all things. And then the person goes on to say, you see, even Paul said he was rude in speech, but not in knowledge. And this is why I can be crass. This is why I can be rude. This is why I can demean you, because Paul said, and Paul did. Yeah.
Yes, and I mean, Paul gets his Zazel whenever somebody wants to go and do something that can be perceived as controversial or being perceived as bad behavior, they point to someone else and say, "Well, look, he did it." You
Mm.
and then they want to, as they would say, what do they call that? Oh my goodness! Because it's because I'm being facetious that it won't come to me.
See, there you go, Sister Mayana. For those who just joined us, welcome to the
I
discussion. We're
know,
talking about crude words,
it's because I
lewd
know I ain't about
gestures.
to do right. No, because
Yeah,
yeah.
you was about to not do right. See, the most I was like, slap it out your mouth.
Oh,
She was
let
about to not do right in the middle of the do right conversation. That's what happens, you see.
it's like I'm about to be sarcastic right now. Now, what animals has gonna put a pause on it? Yeah.
It was like delete. So for those who just joined us, if you want to be on the other side of the discussion, and I don't want to misspeak for anyone, feel free to do so. What are your thoughts? Israelites, crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips. You know, I've seen people curse. I can't say this enough because I'm like, what? As LF says, what part of the script is that? You know what I'm saying? Like, what part of the script is someone asks you a question and you curse them out and call them a cave dweller? Like, what part of the script is that? What part of the script do you go from 0 to 100 just that quick? And this is leaving a bad taste in many people's mouth, some who have not challenged you and some who were genuinely curious. As I see unclean lips, the thought that comes to my mind is, and I'm going to pull some scriptures that talk about the tongue, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about our words, which comes from our thoughts, which ultimately manifest as our deeds. And we're going to talk about governing our vessel, the tongue, right? But before we do that, when as Sister Mina, you made mention of, you're coming with the word, you know what I mean? And to
Right.
think that you can come with the word in this unclean vessel or in such an unclean presentation, you coming with the show bread, it got crumbs from last week, you know what I mean? It got a little extra salt that fell on the tray. It's like, what's this? You're presenting something. You're a vessel. You represent the creator in the earth, and you're coming that have people wondering, what power do you represent? Isaiah, when Isaiah, I'm going to just read it because it's short. It says, Isaiah 6:1, hallelujah. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Most High seated on a throne, high and exalted, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above him stood seraphim, each having 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their faces. With 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying, and they called out to one another, holy, holy, holy. Israel is supposed to be holy, right? Even though we're in this land and we're dispersed throughout the nations, we're called to come back unto the Creator as a holy people, separated unto him. It says, the Most High of hosts, his glory fills the earth. 4, the doorposts and thresholds shook at the sound of their voices, and the temple was filled with smoke. Then I said, so he's describing a holy scene. Okay. And the first thing he thinks about is, oh, chill, I'm not ready. Woe is me, for I am ruined because I am a man of unclean lips, dwelling among a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Most High of hosts. And that's, I can go on to what happens after that. But my point is that he's in a space that something is happening. Okay, and which he's entering into the presence of the Most High. And the first thing he thinks about is, oh, chill. I'm a man of unclean lips, of dwelling amongst a people of unclean lips. He thinks about his condition to see whether or not he's worthy to be in the presence of the Creator, right? And so here we are, in whatever spaces we are, going out in the name of the Creator. And how many of us bethink ourselves to be like, wow, you know what I'm saying? Am I ready? Your thoughts, Sister Ma'am.
The ability and the skill to be able to bethink oneself and to be humbled in the moment of passion and agitation is definitely a sign of maturity, because it is very common for us to react from a gut instinct or a gut reaction, what they call the knee jerk reaction. But to, like, as I said, to take the moment to bethink yourself and remember not only that what you have to say is supposed to represent the Most High, but that when we go out there as representatives of the Most High, that we are also bringing with us the Most High's name. And
Mm-hmm.
so, to we need to we forget that we are in the state that we're in because we have been prideful. We are in the state that we're in because we have sought our own pleasures, that we
Mhm.
have not been obedient, and we, instead we have heeded our own desires, our own lusts, and our own reactions. So the one that you brought out was important. Um, the reason, the words that I was looking at before, I was actually looking for my notes, because instead of saying clout chasers and swagger, and swagger jackers, um, because
Is
that's
that
the
what you were
accurate
gonna
thing that came
say?
out, that we were cloud chasing, which is exactly what happens when you go and you say, I'm doing this thing because someone else who has a reputation or has been established as an important figure. If you say, well, that person did it, what you're really doing is you're leaning on the credibility of someone else to
Mm-hmm.
justify a behavior that you have, which is in effect cloud chasing. This is in effect, it's another
Oh.
way of swagger jacking someone else. Like when we say, like, for example, if um just not to pull the conversation away to another very hot topic, but let's say a man that wants to pursue a particular marriage strategy, and he points to Dawid being a king, a man of stature, someone that is arguably very well revered in the community. If he's saying, "Well, if you, it's not me. If you judge me, then you have to judge David. If you judge me, then you have to judge Abraham. If you judge me, then you have, And then the idea is you're not going to want to judge Abraham, so don't judge me. And that's basically leaning on the credentials of someone else.
That's
And so, for example,
is
if you want to take the bite out of, just to say in the New Testament, but not to that side of Malachi, and not to, disparage, but just to say, look, this is another example coming from that side of Malachi, when a person wants to justify calling a woman a bee,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they go to that
The
side of
severity.
Malachi to say,
Right.
well, that's what the New Testament Messiah did. The New Testament Messiah referred to a woman as a female dog, and what is a female dog if not a bee,
Mm.
right? And so this is the logic. This has been said by quite a few men, and accepted and picked up by quite a few women. Because what are you going to do now? If the New Testament Messiah, and if you are a Yahushua minded person, and you see that this is what your Messiah has said, you can't, once you say this is not acceptable, then what you then have to do is say, well, then your Messiah is something that's unacceptable. And a lot of people are not prepared to do that. And then a lot of people are prepared to question whether or not that interpretation of the text is even true, right? So, like, even with the scripture that you gave about 2 Corinthians 11:6, where Paul says that he was rude in speech. Now, um, without going into the Greek or what have you, just for those people that speak English, um, rude, it doesn't necessarily have to mean vulgar and offensive. Rude could, when some people um have used rude as part of a longer word, there's a longer word which is rudimentary. Rudimentary means basic, simple, plain. So if he's saying that I'm not, although the way that I speak may be rudimentary, the things that I'm talking about are much deeper. You understand? The same thing comes with, like, the word perk. The word perk is a shortened version of a longer word, which is perquisite. I always say perquisite, but a lot of people say perk. So, without, like I said, without going into the Greek to look at which word he actually was
You know, you
using,
got me going into the Greek now. I'm like, hold on.
right? And I think that's a good study, because when even from younger, when I was part of that from that mindset, it didn't dawn on me that it could possibly have meant it's a permission to be rude. Every time I heard that explanation, it didn't make sense to me. So for me, I always went to it. There must be something else, and so rudimentary made sense to me. Just like perk and perquisite make sense to me. But like I said, I want to say that I probably did look at it uh, to see, because that's six in my head. But that was some 20 years ago that
And
was
I
something
did,
I had to think about.
before we continued, I did have a thought, and I was waiting patiently to put in my little.
Well,
I was
yeah.
waiting. Look, I was waiting patiently for those who are out there who just joined us, who would like to join the conversation. Feel free to hit me up, and we can make that happen. You understand? I was waiting patiently to ask whether or not you were referring to pre-exilic clout chasers. Like, what?
Yo, we got jokes of pre-exilic ever. Yes, pre-exilic cloud chasers.
Yes, so that watch out, y'all, for the show that's coming up soon. Pre-exilic clout chasers, while we talking about, clout chasing in the pre-exilic time. But anywho, go ahead, Sister Mayana.
Did you
I'm
look
a,
up Second Corinthians join? You know what? Now that I don't have it in front of me, like I said, I was looking for my notes because I didn't want to bring that out without being able to back it up.
it's kind
Um,
of too late, sister. You done busted out on us. Now we have to do some fact checking live on air here.
that's it.
We
You
go.
want to go on your side, and I'll go and look up the Second Corinthians 6 joint.
Can. That can work.
I'll
Um,
do that back
uh,
in.
so another scripture. There's plenty of them. This is a very important part of our walk. I think, and I've said it many times, that we run out and want to convince everyone else about what we have yet to process within ourselves, right? Which makes it a hard sell, which makes us have to push more, which makes us have to forwardly advance on someone else's uh, spiritual journey so that we can convince them, we can win them over, which is language that's coming from other spaces. You can win them over to your side. And a lot of this will come if we became that which we are professing. Because what happens and what has happened in times past is that people hear what you say, and maybe you caught the fish and they came in, or they came to the congregation or the camp or the Knesset, and they sat down, and they at first were in this level of an emotional fervor, and they believed everything you said, and then they began to see your mask falling off, or the mask of the leader or the people. And like they say, there's a term they call church hurt. And then they become church hurt, and then they become disenchanted, and then they claim it's the creator's fault. When in all the time, it's not the Most High's fault. It's the people in the way in which we are approaching this particular subject matter, right? And so, yes, once we become emotionally connected to something, we can make it say and do whatever we want it to do. But ultimately, how much harm are we doing, or how much good are we doing? I'm going to go now. Crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips. I'm trying to think about something I just saw recently, and I think we shared it in the group. It was, I have to go back and look, because I think that also made me want to talk about this topic. But Proverbs 26 and 20. No. Proverbs 21 and 23. Salika. Those who guard their mouths and their
Mm,
tongues keep themselves from calamity. Like
that's right.
Solomon is big on talking about where a lot of the root cause of our issues stem from. It stems from our heart, it stems from our mouth. So we hear that out of the abundance of the mouth, the heart speaks. And so when we hear a lot of this crude speech, lewd and lascivious speech, what is happening, it's being mixed and mingled with Torah or with the New Testament, and looking for ways in which it could be justified. So just to, and I'm gonna give it to Sister Maya if she found it, just to tie that a little bit, if I can, with those who may be like, yes, Solomon said it, but it's said in James. For your sake, I'm going to go over to James, who speaks about in 3 and 11, says, out of the same mouth come blessing and curse. My brothers, this shall not be. Can both fresh water and bitter water flow from the same spring? He asks the question. So out of one side of your mouth, this is what we call two-faced in this day and age. Out of one side of our mouth, we're talking, and we all need, to a certain degree, improvement, some more than others in this area, right? Of the way in which we express ourselves, our internal dialogue, and the way in which we use our mouths to curse one another. And then we turn around and say, see, we're a cursed people, because you're using your mouth to curse yourself, and then by extension, using your mouth to curse your brother or your sister. And it has gone beyond the four walls of whatever private building you are. We go live at the click of a button and spew this for the entire world to see and hear, that we have yet to do the internal work. I think I hear Sister Maya over there
Yeah,
battling.
yeah, I got it. I got it. Just give clarity, since like you said, I brought it out. Since I let the cat out the bag, the jack out the box. Let me go ahead and back up some of what I said, because like you said, The tongue, what you put out into the universe is important. We have to remember that the Most High created all things simply by speaking it. So we forget that the power that's in the tongue. And so to that end, since I made the assertion that rude could be an allusion to rudimentary rather than vulgarity, I went ahead and looked up what the Greek is saying. So in the Greek, for those of you who like the Strongs, it says it's Strong's number G as in Greek 2399. And the Greek word is idiotas, which is the word where we use to get idiot from. And so it means someone who's unlearned. And we see that apparently it is used in at least 5 different places. Staying in Corinthians, we go to 1 Corinthians 14:16, and it says, "Else when thou shalt bless with the Spirit, how shall he that occupy the room of the unlearned?" And unlearned there, the same G 2399 that is translated as rude in 2 Corinthians 11:6 is translated as unlearned. So it's not vulgar or rude or being vulgar, but it means that you are simple or unlearned. We find that also in 14:23, 14:24, the same word unlearned. Um, in Acts 4:13, it is translated in the KJV as ignorant. Someone who's ignorant, unlearned, and ignorant men. They marvel and I'll read Acts 4:13 to you. Now when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and perceived that they were unlearned and ignorant. So that's what the word ignorant there is used as rude. It's translated as rude elsewhere. So again, the Greek word there is idiotas, literally an idiot, someone who's not wise. Not so. What you are justifying is not. It's justifying. You're justifying ignorance. You're justifying being ignorant. And again, even there, it's not the way we use it now. It's the idea that it's something that has to be done at a very, very low grade, low vibration. It's something that's very simple. It still means simple. Someone who was ignorant back in the days, we called them a simpleton. Someone who was ignorant, it was someone who was very, very simple. And so, it doesn't mean, and it's certainly not a license to be crude. The word here is rude. It's not crude. Rudimentary is something that's very simple. On a very, very, if you think that someone is not bright, you're not going to give them complicated concepts to consider. You give them something very basic, very simple. And so he's saying that although his speech might be at the level so that everyone can receive it, the concepts that he's talking about are very complicated. And so there's
Uh-oh.
so for all of those people who want to go to Second Corinthians 11:6 to justify being, uncouth in every possible way, then that's not what that's about. Have
Very
to take
interesting.
that lollipop. Yeah, we're gonna have to take that lollipop from you.
Oh boy. For those who just joined us, we're talking about Israelites, crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips. Let's get into some of these lewd gestures, Sister Mayana.
Ooh,
Trying to, I'm trying to think, and we ain't gonna go too long today, y'all. We're gonna, what I'm saying, get in there and get out. It's been a crazy long day.
it
But
really.
we're gonna talk a little bit on some lewd gestures, and even lewd references and some of the things that make you go, I've seen people uh, ask questions like, um, if they have multiple wives, can the two wives be there at the same time? And people are like, what are you talking about? To some, that would be like a lewd, inquisitive like question. Like, why would you even present such a question? Why would you put that on the table? Uh, there's some things that just make you go, what in the world? What are your thoughts about lewd gestures? Have you seen Israelites suggesting to people or heard of them suggesting lewd and lascivious type behavior?
I
That what's one question, is this holiness? Is of this the most high, or is this of the ego? I'm gonna try to find in the meantime that video that I was talking about.
I mean, even when it's the ego, I think that it's also a degree of distance from the origin and etymology of a lot of these sayings that we have normalized in our vocabulary. I remember that, was it Magruder? It was one of the women that went out to discuss some of the history. The history had been discussed before, but I think that it became popular on the social media streets when she started talking about the origins of maybe saying MF, and that how that was an actual literal condition that happened in slavery, and we've normalized it. We've taken all the bite out of it, and so now we call each other an MF, and not realizing what kind of psychological damage that really points to. So there's those kinds of languages. I remember in a conversation that I had with you, we were talking about the readiness to associate everything with feces. This feces, that feces, about feces,
Mhm.
and not think about how really um, unclean and dirty feces is, right?
Mhm.
So, and
Yes.
your song comes, a song that you enjoy, or
Yeah,
a song
that's your
when you
feces.
you hear a song that you like and you're trying to express joy, but what you say is, "Yo, that's my feces," and you're like, "Really? That's your feces?" Like,
Yeah, that's your
that's
doodle.
that's the opposite of joy and things that give you pleasure.
Right.
Is, who's celebrating their feces like that? But we don't pay attention to the ways or the images that these kinds of words bring up, and gestures. I was sharing with you a story. Like, one of my favorite people, he was telling me that he was, he's a New Yorker. I live in New York. You used to live in New York, so you know what it is. That road rage is a real thing here. And he found himself, although he's extremely polished, incredibly intelligent, and he had a very prestigious job, but he was leaving that very prestigious, highly stressful job, and he's navigating through New York City traffic, and someone cuts him off, and so he's like, suck my, whatever, do this to my D, right? And so the gentleman responds to him. Mind you, at first, okay, that's not true. They're arguing, they kind of throwing barbs at each other through their windows in the midst of New York City traffic. And at some point, my friend says this to the gentleman, and the gentleman just kind of responds extremely seriously, and he says, "No." Break my D, and he's like, "No." And so my friend said, in that moment, you become really aware of what you said, because, like, what's the comeback to that? Please, like, what can you say after that? You realize at that point what you have said when the other person responds that seriously to you, to the suggestion, and then all of the things that you are suggesting and implying by telling another man to do this thing to you.
Correct. We gotta have a serious question like, can we sit down, doing some Gail King to R. Kelly now, Robert. You know what I mean? Like we
Can we talk about why you thought that was okay?
right, let's talk about why you think that this type of suggestive language is okay ever.
Ever.
Speaking of R. Kelly, and just the video as you were speaking, if you don't know, I've been people out there. I've been like, I took a break though, but I was heavily in researching and trying to understand some things. But during the video, body language experts were saying that he was shaking his head no, but verbalizing the affirmative, right? So this kind of goes to what you're talking about when you're like, this doodoo, is
Right,
good. It's like doodoo is not good. So you're shaking your head yes and no at the same time, or you're verbalizing the positive while shaking your head. And so our words are not matching with our thoughts, right?
right,
Everything, the whole world has been like, but when we were younger, oh man, this is bad. And we really meant to
yeah,
say it's good. Or this is
right,
wicked. And then you're trying to say this like, well, if it's good, why don't you just say it's good?
right,
And we make this a slang. So when we wonder why our reality is so convoluted or so messed up, it's because we're sending mixed messages into the
right,
universe.
right,
If something is feces, look how much offended our forefather was to eat Ezekiel when the Most High was like, check it out, Ezekiel, I'm gonna need you, you know what I'm saying, do a little something for me. And Ezekiel was like, over poo poo? Ezekiel was offended. He was like, how about cow dung? He started negotiating. You know what I'm saying? How about little cow feces? Not human feces, but
Right,
today we did have a situation personally in this transatlantic slave trade where everything was feces. Where
right,
you violate in your feces, the feces of others, the feces of someone who was above you, you
right,
were eating where the feces was and sleeping where the feces was. And I think, like, even one of the spaces, as I think about it, I'm like, the trauma in this area is heavy because we can't get away from it. And like you said, everything, if you just sit down and listen, wherever you are, where people may not be aware of themselves and listen to how they speak, and you're like, wow, that's interesting. You know,
right,
even the way we string words together, it's like, that's an interesting gesture you just recommended there. You know what I mean?
right, right.
And then
I
at the
mean,
same, go ahead.
no, I mean, for those people that may be joining the show now or in the future and saying, you know what, okay, my Aunt Amuna, I think now y'all just, y'all doing too much, y'all going too deep with
Ah,
this word.
Benjamin. But go ahead.
Just let you know that we have people that are saying those are just words. You know that's not what we mean. But
Mm,
I think that the challenge here is to take responsibility for that and not be so quick to dismiss what's familiar as okay. Just because it's common and just
right,
because it has been normalized doesn't mean that it's normal or that it's okay. When we go back, at least not for Hebrew, when we're trying to be Hebraic minded, just to kind of go back and see how it, how careful we are about language. The fact that there's so much on record about discipline, so much on record about uh, restraint, so much on record about minding the tongue and the dangers of the tongue and what lies in the tongue. And then we see how the Most High literally uses words to bring things into being, and with the way words are discussed in terms of a Hebraic as a Hebraic concept. We attach words to spirit and to spirit to breath. I mean, the very breath. So we understand that words are life in a very real way. Hebraically speaking, I know, and again, I get it. You know, we do it all the time. We grew up with these things. The people around us do it. We never really thought about it, but it's okay to think about it. It's okay. Like we talked about earlier, this idea, why would a man say to another, give another man that kind of invitation, especially a Hebrew man, because uh, as a people and a culture, this is not a homo-friendly environment. And yet this is a very homo-friendly comment or a very, very extremely homo-friendly invitation from one man to another. And so but it's so offensive. It's meant to be offensive. We have a history, a not too distant history of buck breaking. If you wanted to wholly debase a man, or if you wanted to challenge his masculinity, you put him on the other side of another man and have another man kind of break him sexually. And so to invite a man into that kind of prone position in front of you, then that is a way of challenging or his masculinity and making him effeminate in that conversation. So there's a lot going on there. There's a certain degree of power meant to be represented in that kind of statement, although it's an extremely homosexual power. It's not something that is a Hebraic way of exerting manhood or power. And it has become such an incredibly offensive way of expressing something that you even hear women say it, or women making some
yeah,
kind of
that's
adjustment to it. You know, women will be like, you know what, suck my, and you're like, you don't have one of those. Like, well, then, then use my counterpart. But finding other ways
yeah,
of using that procreate. We talked about it before, the misuse of the procreative region. That's not what that region is for. That region is about giving life. It's not about finding a way to debase another human being. This is how we make human beings. So the fact that we have accepted a process that misuses that space It's also something to really think about. Why are we doing that? Why are we okay with that? We know what
And
the
that
Most High made those spaces for. Why are you using that to break someone else?
question. As you mentioned that, it came to my mind, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was the comedian Monique recently, or not recently, in some time in one of her acts, actually invited whomever that didn't agree with her, to lay lips to her invisible male tutor. And so I'm like, okay, that's interesting. But to hear of people would say, well, that's the world. But to hear of, and I'm gonna tell y'all a real story. To hear of Israelites, I found this
Mm,
out early. I found this out real early, and I promise you in the beginning, I was shocked. Okay,
yes.
so maybe I'm early on. I mean, it was a Hebrew teacher, no less. You see, and this is what I'm talking about. You come into spaces and you're like, yeah, you know what I mean? And then you're like, no. And it was a Hebrew teacher teaching the Hebrew. But after class, was having the road rage of cursing the people on the street.
Mm,
And I'm like, huh? You see what I'm saying? I dropped a certain level of speech a long time ago, right? And that's just my walk personally. I understood as I began to search for the Most High, like I couldn't bring this with me. You know what I'm saying? I can't be like, Baruch Hashem on one thing and be like, you mother, you know what I'm saying? I didn't feel like that kind of, you know what I mean? Was the way in which I wanted to do this walk. And so a long time ago, I dropped that. And I know that there are people who may take their time, but dude, 20, 30, 40 years in this walk, and you still have not learned one of the very key fundamental ways of which to show that the Most High is with you by mastering your own tongue. You see what I'm
right.
saying? That shows that this is we are not all, but many are not understanding the seriousness of saying we know something but refusing to do it. You understand what I'm
Mm,
saying? And this is where we feel it's more advantageous for us to go out and spread the good news to the world. I tell you a story since we rocking out. I told you this shop. I was here minding my all the way business, and the baby is like somebody knocked on the door. So I peeped through the window. I was like, "Hey, JW, what's good?" Right? So I opened the door, start chit chatting with the Jehovah Witnesses, and they do their whole little spiel. And I gave them a similar discussion that I'm having tonight. Like, yo, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And you may
right.
have people running out here thinking they're doing the best thing or they're being pleasing in the sight of the Most High, not knowing your life is your testament, not knowing that the Most High sees us and He searches the heart and tries the reins, and we ain't fooling Him. You see what I'm saying? So then what are we really doing this for? Like to take a true inventory of the way we speak about ourselves and the way we speak about others and how we curse each other out in our minds. And then find ways and scriptures to be able to stand on our pulpits and say, I'm justified in doing this and I'm justified in doing that. And how does one react in that? Like recently we had a situation on Debate Talk for You. Where someone was attacking you. Today they call it ad hominem, right? We call it, you know
Mhm.
what I'm saying? They came for me.
Yeah.
And they came for you, and you got to sit there and hold your composure. While somebody's hurling all manner of insults at you, and you have to a certain degree, still show that you have a government of your spirit. Mariana said it earlier, it's a level of maturity. How mature are we? Do we make excuses for our behavior? Do we say, this is where I heard, this is where I grew up at? Like, I grew up in a place where curse words took on, they were run on sentences.
Hmm.
You string them together with twine and rope, and they didn't even make sense. But at the end of the day, you was like, yeah, I felt good on that one. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It wasn't no simple one. So, I'm just saying that I'm not coming from a place where I don't know how it makes someone feel empowered. And maybe we can talk about, to a certain degree, why people feel as though, or the feeling of when you, like they used to say, chip bad word, or when you curse, there's a level of feeling like, yes, I'm empowered in that moment. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think that's an important question because what we're looking for, and that's what we're doing when we're using that kind of language, is that we are intentionally putting someone down so that we can
Mm-hmm.
feel bigger, or that we can feel empowered in that moment, and that person is disempowered because we have diminished them, and we've taken away dignity from them in those ways. And that's what this kind of language is intended to do. So again, when we look back at, for example, the invitation to meet one's member, I'll just put it that way.
Yo, yo, the Meat One's members, everything, son. I'm sorry, they have a documentary called Meet Your Meat, and you just messed up that documentary for me. But go ahead.
But
That's
yeah,
sorry, side note. I'm sorry. There's a real documentary. It's a
about meat. Wow, that's not good. Okay, so but
right.
yes,
No,
the
I'm sorry.
invitation to do
Sidebar,
that.
sidebar. Right. That
Uh-huh.
documentary is about looking at the meat industry and where your meat is coming from in mass production. So that's why it's called Meet Your Meat. But go ahead.
Yeah, just so you know that Amuna's not out there watching porn. It was a
Absolutely not.
documentary.
As a matter of fact, let me go get the documentary link right now so we have no misconceptions. Hold on. Go ahead, Sister Mayana,
Drop
because you
that
know
link
how
in the
Israel
box.
be quick. Israel be like, tap, tap, tap. Amuna said at 2 minutes and 37 seconds. And Mayana was like, what? Hold on one second.
But yeah, okay. So while she puts that link in the box, so you get educated on your produce. That it's not, cause it's not produce. It's your animal products. So anyway, one of the reasons why men, or even in some cases women, will give the invitation to meet one's member is because they're trying to, again, diminish the dignity of the other person. Um, but there are other ways, and I think it has been pointed out. And so, to be fair, in some of these discussions where there's justification for being cruel to another person in language, again, we can point to, and because the examples that I remember come from that side of Malachi, that's the only reason why I'm over there. Of course, anyone who's listening in, feel free to think of ways that we see it happening on on the Torah and Tanakh side of Malachi. Also, I'm sure that we can find reasons and ways also from there. But an example that I can recall is that the New Testament Messiah would say words like, when he accused the people of being a generation of vipers, a generation, and calling them swine and the like. And it is a fair statement to say that those kinds of words would have been considered vulgar in that time period and in that context. And I would agree that at that conversation was meant to lower the dignity of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, because they were, someone that may have been considered of high esteem, and it was meant to lower the dignity of those people. Because think about it, what could be more offensive to devout Hebrews, or those who consider themselves devout Hebrews, than to be called swine? There's really nothing more
Well,
vile, um,
yeah.
right
Yeah.
among us
Swine
than to
and
be
a
called.
native cloth, to call you a native cloth, a rag, a dirty
Right,
menstrual
right,
rag.
right. We'll refer, right. If you want to talk about on the Tanakh side, right, to compare the nation to the Nadar rag, that is meant. That's a very disgusting thing to be
Right.
called, right?
Right.
It's a very dirty allusion, right? It's right up there with feces. This
Right. Right.
kind of
Right.
this expelling of the waste from of the dead material from the body, and to liken the nation to that, to liken the nation to he said, "You're a generation of vipers." Now, again, for any Hebrew, right, any devout Hebrew, these ideas or these images of vipers, if I told you to think biblically about vipers or serpents, what's one of the things that comes to mind? What is it? If I told you, what's the most maybe one of the most infamous examples of a serpent in a conversation?
Oh, the Nakash,
The
Genesis.
Nahas, right?
Yeah.
So for a devout Hebrew, right? At that time, there was no New Testament, so it would only be Torah and Tanakh people. Those images would bring about the thought of the serpent in the garden, which would be the very first introduction of sin and separation from the Most High. So it's from Hebrew to Hebrew, for you to say that not only am I, but I come from an entire generation of serpents, that is not a compliment. There's no
Yeah,
way
you
to
can't.
get right.
You came for me.
Yo, you came for me, right? They're gonna say, "Yo, you came for me." So this is the kind of language that's being used, and so the argument again to justify being somewhat vulgar would
Pre-exilic clout
be
chasing.
Right, would go and find someone who is already revered and respected, and say, you see, this person, you, or this depends. Some people accept him as a prophet, a person, or a savior, but not necessarily a deity. But some people do consider him a deity. But anyway, this figure in the New Testament makes these types of statements. Are you going to judge him? Right. So then, if you're not going to judge him, you can't judge me when I do. It must be okay. And so we find ourselves being comfortable about things. But the fact is that if you're going to represent scripture, and I think that's what we're really saying, Amuna, right now. In addition to, yes, we should have a better range of vocabulary that we can
For
express
real.
ourselves in ways where you don't have to rely on such colorful language. I mean, sometimes I don't know, sis. I mean, I have heard certain people curse, and it sounds like that it's musical. Like, it's
I
almost
told you.
like
I come
it's
from where
almost
cursing.
lovely,
I
right?
come from where cursing sound like poetry. You ain't saying, you
Yes,
know what I'm saying? I've heard it. You be like, wow, what was that word again? You know what
yes.
I mean? But you know, again,
I've actually witnessed some very like magical people, like especially like that friend that I was telling you about. Like, he just has a way of putting words together that you're just like, you know what? I'm sure you insulted me, but wow, that was really
that
nice.
was interesting.
It was
But
great
but
how you did
but
that. It's a skill. I have seen him be very skillful in the way he has dressed down quite a few people, especially on the basketball court. And but not to praise bad behavior,
yeah, Mariana, it sounds like, you know what I'm saying?
not
We
to
like
praise
bad
bad
behavior.
behavior.
And that's another question. I was reading, I'm glad you brought that up. I was reading as always, a moon of slave narratives, right? Shout out to those who are on our solonomic side, because y'all don't get tired of me talking about the slave narratives. But I was reading a book called African Voices of the Atlantic Slave Trade, right? And so this woman, Auntie Bailey, she goes to the continent, she goes to Ghana, and what she finds is very telling as it relates to what you just mentioned about the way in which someone is able to uh, masterfully insult one another, but it sounds so poetic. It actually is poetry. It's called, they called it, it says, I'll read it shortly. As Ghanaian scholar Kofi Awono points out in his review of Iwe oral literature, one of the most fearsome insults centers around slavery, right? And
Hmm.
then he goes on to say that traditional griots, such as Komi Ekipe, use their awareness of this shame in performance of what is called halo poetry. Halo poetry is performance of poetry that includes insults of a
Mm.
particular person or a group. Kind of like what you call playing the dozens, you
Playing,
know,
I was
your
about to
mama
say,
sessions.
yeah.
This was actually a thing. And according to them, this was something that they did, engaged in. They used this practice or the social practice to help with grievances in the community so that it
Okay.
wouldn't escalate to violence.
Oh,
I
you
thought
know
that
what?
was
Now that you
interesting.
brought that up, kind of bringing it back to the topic that I don't want to talk about today, maybe for another topic,
What's
but
that? What's that? Hold on. What topic is that? Hold on. What?
it's the P word. P word.
The P word. Mayana, first you're telling people to meet the meat, and now I don't know people. I don't know where this is going. Crude words, lewd justice, and unclean lips.
No,
Israelites, is it
religion.
right? Go ahead, Sister Mayana. What P word? But for those who just joined us, that was the name. So this is actually a practice that came across the water that people still engage in. You know what I'm saying? And some are better adept at it than others, right? But go ahead. One more thing, we see it also in the rap battle game, right? When some people doing diss records and they're going back and forth, and we're like, "Ooh, did you hear what they said?" And that was actually the art form that many of our ancestors engaged in. But go ahead.
Yeah, the diss track. Yeah. Well, the P word, of course, is polygyny. For those of you who are like,
Oh, dang, Ayana, why we have to go there? Oh, dang.
See, because you made me say it. But
I
I
said
get
halo, sis. I said halo poetry.
well, the no, because the reason, no, again, the reason why I'm bringing up polygyny is because in our study of polygyny, when you and I did that
Okay.
series on Litbalm. Again, if you missed that series, by all means, take some time and go over to
Okay.
litbalm.com and look that up. But anyway, while we were doing that research, one of the things that I found, um, what I came across when I was investigating this idea of intra-female jealousy in that particular marriage strategy, I found that in some cultures or some parts of the continent where polygyny was still openly practiced, that there was actually, as part of, because it was something they realized, like no one on the continent thought that it was natural for women not to have jealousy, but because they understood it and knew that it needed to be worked out, that there was actually a practice where the first wife got to all the way dress down the woman who was coming into her marriage
Mm.
public. And it was like there was nothing she could do. Like she dressed her all the way down, and all her friends came, and everybody just all the way just kind of humiliated the
Right.
second one. The first wife was not expected to think this was a joyous occasion. She had the opportunity to publicly express just how disgusted, upset, and angry she was about it, and she was allowed to completely dress down this woman. It was a public, perfect, and it was built into the system. Like the husband was not going to come and defend her at all. This was something that this woman was supposed to be subjected to.
Mm.
And that was just, and but again, the idea was not to uplift this woman. They were dressing her down, and that was part of the culture. This insulting her was
Right.
part of the culture, is part of the process. So again, so just that I was just reminded of that when you were talking about the poem where they were using it as a way of grieving.
It's the ancient battle rap. It's the ancient battle rap.
A way of grieving, a way of expressing, that you're unhappy, or the way of working through an uncomfortable, space or headspace. And so just as that poetry was used to work through something, this space was given to the first wife to work through whatever her
Right.
anxieties are, whatever her resentments were. That was her time to work it through.
Mm.
Right. And I don't know. I'm not saying that she had, I don't know. She may have just had that one opportunity to do. I don't think she got to do it annually or something.
Right.
But
Like the
she
yeah,
definitely,
I don't know. I don't know. And again, this is not saying that it's right. It's saying that this was cultural. So I
right,
think to tie it to what you were saying, that a lot of people may say, and we're gonna come to read the topics, I mean the comments. This is what I have been doing, this is what everybody's doing. Oh, you're a prude, just because we worship the most high doesn't mean, we can't express ourselves. And the question is, how does bitter and sweet come from the same fountain? Are
right,
we really doing what it says here? I have another verse for y'all. Uh, Proverbs 18, 20, and 21. From the fruit of their mouth, a person's stomach is filled.
right,
What you're saying. If you're talking about poo poo, we're going to talk about the fu word as well. With the harvest of their lips, they are satisfied. The tongue has power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. So when you're spewing this venom out of your mouth, understand that it first had to be within your body and
right,
be within your heart and your mind. So you're actually, that's why they said, uh, you know, drinking poison and expecting the other person to die is not really realistic. You will have to be, you are the host of this negative energy that you're carrying around with it. This is the reason why the moment someone cuts you off, it spews out because it's ruminating in your spirit, and it takes your joy, it takes your life, it takes a lot of things from you because this is what you have in your heart. You know what I'm saying? And so it easily comes out. We have to consider these things when sickness comes into the picture, or feeling old comes into the picture, or feeling down and depression comes into the picture. You have to say, well, what comes out of my mouth? And is
mm,
that what's in my stomach? Because that's what Proverbs 18 and 20 says. That, I'll say it again, the fruit of their mouth, a person's stomach is filled. Right? So if you ate some bad food, or you're chewing on some bad words, then you are poisoning yourself essentially.
right.
So when we think we're actually debasing others, we're really actually doing harm to ourselves. I'm just saying, what do I know? For those who just joined us, Israelites, crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips. What are your thoughts about the FU word, Sister Mariana? Have you heard some FUs? I can't even remember the last time. It had to be like a really long time ago. um, until I found out what it meant or what some people say it meant. Have you heard that one about them saying it's an acronym and where it's coming from?
I've heard a lot of theories, origin theories about that particular word. Not all of them come to mind. You make me want to do a Google search now, but I because it's a word that I accept as something that's meant to be jarring.
Right.
That some of the origins they don't stick. Instead, I the image is still because of the way that we use it. When you say, again, I think it's akin to the meet the member purpose.
I'm so done with having to meet the member.
No, because that's the kindest way that I can say it. The idea
Yo,
is
it sounds like a show on PBS. Meet the member tonight. On Meet the Member, we'll have guests on.
no, because it's a call to vulnerability. When Because I mean it's a very the act. Think about the fact again. Procreation is labeled this when you want to make procreation something that is vile
Right, right,
and intrusive and abusive. Even it
right.
takes all of the any intimacy is out of it. It becomes very
It's base.
animalistic. It's an
Yeah.
animalistic, impulsive kind of very physical. All the spirituality is taken out of it, and so
Correct.
you're not making love. You're not doing the Ralph Tresvant. You're not. This is not Mr. Sensitivity. Dude is in and out, right? And so it's meant to let you know that this is not something that is endearing in any way. So you're told to F off, right? You're told we're not making love, we're just effing. We're not, or F it, right? So the idea is that it's not something you should be invested in. It's something that doesn't mean anything,
Right.
right? It's a word that is functioning to diminish and devalue whatever you're talking about.
Mm-mm-mm.
It's dismissive. It's a dismissive tool um in the conversation. No matter what we're talking about. If you're talking about sex and you said that it's effing, it's meant to be dismissive. Don't think we're having a relationship. We're just
Right.
effing.
I've
It's
heard that.
dismissive, right?
I've heard it. Them say that. I think I was doing something, and I was like, this. They were actually saying it on the television. And I was like, what? They say that on TV now? But
Yeah,
yeah, like don't catch feelings. This is not what that is. Although you're in the most intimate space for the individual
right,
that you be in, and then they're gonna say don't catch feelings. Like what are you? You know what I'm saying? Why you
right.
acting? Yeah, I hear you on that one.
Right. I mean, that's something that lets you know there's no investment there. And,
Mm.
that's again, that's a whole other conversation, another under the palm discussion that's, well lit over on the under the palm side of Facebook right now, where we're talking about the value that we place on sex,
Oh,
where it's
oh my
appropriate to
goodness.
have sex, and what the implications of sex is, and what's the appropriate spaces for sex, and the ways that we approach, invest in, and embrace sex will depend on our level of commitment to it. What kind of commitment comes from it? When is commitment necessary? All those ideas of value in that space. So again, to go back to the effing of it, right?
Is it liberating though? I see in the comment section that LF says that one of his family members says that it's liberating because right now we're holding ourselves, we're governing ourselves, and it's liberating, especially in this society when you even if you're Israel, because I see Israel now, cursing on their own pages, and I have to look at the page and look at the person, look at the page and look at the person, and I'll be like, oh, okay. You know what I'm saying? So is it something that is liberating that people should not hold themselves back and allow themselves to have the full range of expression of your emotions?
What then we have to ask ourselves, what are we liberating ourselves from? So I mean, think about what we're saying here. We're liberating ourselves from what? Decorum? Is that like the objective to liberate ourselves from discipline? I mean, are we bragging that we are not being disciplined in this moment? Who wants to be disciplined all the time? Who wants to have good behavior
Yeah,
all the time? Let's be free to do bad things.
yeah, pretty much.
Because I mean, because I hear, I mean, I hear, but when once again, let's think about what we're saying. There's freedom in it, but then we have to talk about, okay, yeah, you know what? There's freedom, but freedom from what?
Freedom from Torah, freedom from government, freedom from managing your spirit and doing what needs to be done so that you can.
Right,
It's the ego.
right.
The
So,
ego
right.
says, "Get off me."
So if that's the case, is that the kind of freedom that we want? Yes, it's liberating. It's, you know what? I'm not holding back. I'm upset, and I'm giving my anger free range to be expressed. But the fact is that the reason why we hold back is because we know the dangers of when someone has unfiltered or fully expressed anger. When someone fully expresses it, we monitor ourselves for a reason, because we understand the danger in it. We understand that if we don't have some kind of governance, then we're capable of doing all kinds of things.
Right.
So do we want to really start to relish in this type of freedom? Now, I myself, and I'll be honest, I'll give it, a moment of transparency. Um, there was a time, and I think I have to think more about it, but I know there was a time when I would argue that all words, like for example, these words we're talking about now, I'm saying on record that these words are meant to be diminishing. These words are meant to be vulgar. These words are meaning, the purpose behind these words is to hurt someone. So sometimes, like, and I remember, and I have said this, and I don't know that I'm completely over that, but sometimes, if what I'm trying to do is hurt you, I don't, then that's why those words were used, because that's the intention. The intention was to hurt you. Right. So I said that to insult you. If you felt insulted, that's because that was my intention. So when there's this discussion about whether there's a freedom to it, it's a very quick way of making a person feel the way I wanted that person to feel. But you know what I have found? Now that I'm saying this, I have found that um people have said, well, I was offended by that, and I remember thinking to myself, I literally didn't say anything to offend you. Like, I'm using all the regular words. Like, I didn't use any of my hard body atomic offensive words. Like, I used regular words. Why are you already offended? But that lets me know that I don't need to drop F bombs to make
Mm.
a person feel dressed down. Very often, and usually unintentionally, when I speak to people and I am just being factual, or I'm being extremely logical, even if I'm being polite, I've had people say that was offensive to them. But remember, dude was mad at me for saying good morning. Oh, you were being sarcastic. I was like, dude, it was good morning.
Come on now, let's be honest now. Let's be honest. Let's be honest. For those who just joined us, we're gonna be honest. Now, can we, even in saying good morning or you're welcome, in the tone, well, you can't tell tone on the keyboard. That's why I really don't like a lot of texting, because I can't tell how you coming for me, right? But there is a truth that it can be other people's perception, or it could be the way in which we'd be like, oh, good morning, or we could be like, good morning. You know what I'm saying? Or we could
Right.
say thank you, or we could be like, shh, thank you. You know what I mean? Like the lady at the health food store today, she had a bit of an attitude, but we ain't gonna go there. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But there's definitely preconceived notions, I would say, that people come with.
Right.
And as you're saying, especially in these social media spaces, you don't even
Right.
gotta curse people out. They can perceive, that's the danger of it. They can perceive, even though you
Right.
didn't give them that impression, whatever they want to perceive. And you, like you said, you can simply say, good morning, sir. And it's like, oh, you came for me. You called me sir. You said good morning.
I know what you really meant.
I know what you really meant. You're like, whoa, the thought crime unit. You know what I'm saying? You're New York undercover now. But I have another script for y'all, because we're gonna keep it scriptural. Let me see here. Let me go ahead and pull out my bag of scripts. Oh, Proverbs 17:27. The one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and
Mm,
whoever has understanding is even tempered. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent,
Right.
and discerning if they hold their tongues. How many spaces have we been in recent times, just in some of the work that we've done collectively, where this actual proverb, you know what I'm saying, of showing restraint and being even tempered, has allowed the conversation to continue in spaces where it wouldn't have if this wasn't employed. Did you experience any of this even temperedness and restraint, Sister Mayan?
Well, I've recently experienced being on the other end of none of that. I think, but I think there's value in that experience also, because if you see how very often, I think that what helps me to temper my own behavior and how I express myself is when I get to see it in someone else and like, wow, is that what it looks like?
Yeah, yep, yep.
Like that looks so incredibly savage. That looks so
Right,
like you really just kind of look ugly in those moments, and it's like, wow, I don't want, if I that's not what I need to do. That's definitely not what I want to look like when
right.
I'm wearing the Most High's name on my back.
Wait, not only on your back, and you can't pull it back. You know what I'm saying? Especially in this social media world, if you're doing it in certain spaces, there is no pullback because the screenshot game be tight. They done pulled it down. You know what I'm saying? Made memes, passed it around, and so it's interesting that you say that. Yesterday, I covered a story quickly. I don't know if anybody saw it. Did I share it? I don't remember if I shared it in the group, but it's floating around of a woman in Connecticut, um, who is cursing a man out, and he has his video on her. The same thing I'm talking about, and she's using all of this, calling him ninjas and calling him MFs, and he has it on a tape. And she turns around and spits towards him,
Mm,
and then she spits again. Okay, come to find out, according to the news article, this woman was employed at the Hamden, which is East Haven school district. So you already know in this social media atmosphere what happens. Either you're
right.
going to quit or you're getting fired. So
Yeah.
she quickly resigns. Police are involved. Someone called DCF because two children were standing there.
Oh
Okay,
wow.
her two children, they're standing there in the midst of this. They're calling it well, I think assault because of the spit. She verbally assaulted him and then she spit. So they have all these things. Plus DCF is involved. So when we're talking about crude words, lewd gestures, and unclean lips, and if we are looking similar, if I can say, to that scene, which if you see the scene is like, whoa, right? And if we are in any spaces looking similar to that scene, and we
Right.
can see that that scene is ugly, as you said, well, what does that say of some of the behavior that we as a collective and many individuals are showing to the public?
Okay.
Because that when I saw that scene, I was like, whoa, lady. Actually, what I said to myself was, did she take her medication this morning? Because she was acting like she had 100, 200 years of hatred balled up in her. That's how she was
Wow.
behaving. And I was like, well, what happened to you? You know, so, but that's what we're talking about, anger, and we're talking about not able to diffuse your own anger and not able to use your words to express whatever your issue is. You know what I mean? And there was all that. She called him every MF in the book. I was like, well, lady, how many times you gonna call? Like, did you know? You know what I'm saying? How do you know what he does? How do you know that? But again, the word is being used in such a way where, as you said, it takes on so many different meanings.
Yeah.
Um,
You, as you were reading, as you were retelling that account, I was thinking about, again, like this idea of the power in the words and what we manifest through our words. Um, that in the Psalm, that's why I went to look it up, because there was Psalms 141, the third verse. It says, I don't even know the version that came up is what I'm looking at right now. Let me find something that okay, so set a guard, Adonai, over my mouth. Keep watch at the door of my lips. It's the door that I was thinking of, because we think about what comes out of our mouth. Um and we don't understand. And we're talking about before. We're talking about this idea of discipline, and this idea of keeping something back. But it's interesting. There's another one. It's actually the GNT translation, which is the way they word is interesting. It says LORD, place a guard at my mouth and a sentry at the door of my lips. And that imagery reminds me of in Genesis where the Most High says that sin crouches at the door, right? So
Mm-hmm.
idea that the psalmist, and I think it is David speaking here, I think it is David speaking here, is asking for someone to be placed there. That's how to safeguard the moment, because
Mm.
that's how dangerous that door is. That's how important it, not to let certain. We talk all the time about, well, one of the most vile pagan deities, right? What was it? What we
I'll
talk
be off.
Peor, right? Because
Yeah,
of the
I'll be off.
door. This
Lord
idea
in
of
the
the
opening.
door.
Yeah.
So
That, by the way, they were doing some lewd and lascivious stuff in the wilderness. But go ahead.
with their
They
mouth,
were,
right? Putting things in and out of their
they
mouth. They
were
got no
meeting.
business putting it
Look, my God, they was meeting members in the wilderness. Okay, and it wasn't new members of the congregation either.
there.
I'm
Okay,
sorry, y'all. Look at that for our people. Mhm.
but so just understanding the mouth as being a door, something that when you keep it shut, you're keeping something inside. You're protecting something. You lock your doors for a reason. When someone places a guard outside the door, it's because there's something that needs to be protected or safeguarded on the other side of that door. I mean, it's just like so many images come to mind when I think about that particular that psalm and what's being said there and
Yeah,
why that petition is there for the Most High to safeguard. So
but
hold my tongue, hold my tongue back, make sure that I don't speak against my life. So I don't speak against my life.
and just to let you know that Dawid wasn't perfect. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Dawid,
already.
you already know. We don't want to get Mayana started, but when Dawid is passing, he calls his son. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And he give him a little whisper in his ear. You know, he literally puts a hit on somebody.
Yeah. Yeah.
As he's passing. So Dawid wasn't perfect, but we do see some of the ways in which, and I think we spoke about that earlier, in which our foreparents cursed were like curses when they,
Yes.
curse someone's eyelashes or their toenails. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They
Right.
they like pronounce these things, but today people pronounce curses in everyday
Yeah.
language.
Yeah.
And they don't, you usually would pronounce it on your enemy, but now you're pronouncing it in your house to your children, to the dog, you know what I'm saying, to the mailman who didn't stop when you wanted him. Like all day long, you're filling your whole environment spiritually with negative energy, because that's what a curse is. And then go on your knees and pray, on the Shabbat or in the evening if you prayed throughout the day, and then you're asking for something and not realizing that you're actually canceling out in many spaces what you're asking for, because you're not able to guard what's coming out of your mouth. And
Right.
once you guard that, then there has to be a purging of the heart. Because I wanted to say, as it relates to a lot of the abuse that's going on, what's funny is people close their mouth on the abuse but open their mouth when, you know what I'm saying? You close your mouth when you're supposed to open it, and then
Yeah.
open your mouth when you're supposed to close it. Like we kind of got everything upside down and inside out.
Yeah.
You're supposed to open your mouth for truth and close your mouth if it's something that you need to purge out of you that is not a good thing. But go
And
ahead.
justice, not truth and justice. And you're right, because this
Correct.
is the Most High tells us in several places that you have to speak for justice, that you have to speak
Correct.
out for the widow, the orphan. You're supposed. These are the things that we're supposed to be using our mouths, our voice, and our declarations for. If you want to cry aloud on something, it's against injustices. That's what you.
Correct.
That's when you go to the top of your lungs to decry something, but not because of other foolishness, but as you were speaking about that, and giving those examples of how cavalier we are with some of these curses, I was reminded of, and no, I'm not necessarily recommending that people go back and look at this, but I'm sure somebody
Uh-oh.
has. But no, I think you and I have had conversations about how this is not the most appropriate of shows, but South Park had an
Oh,
entire episode about I think it's called the word of curse, and it was like this idea that people have been using certain languages and have normalized it so much that maybe, they say, what would happen if that if people kept doing it, it really unlocked some kind of apocalypse, in time kind of thing, because everyone had taken to using these words so cavalierly that they were summoning up evil, or they were summoning up some kind of wickedness, because these words were meant to evoke those kinds of, and elicit those kinds of feelings. So when you
Mm-hmm.
have that much negative energy being thrown into the universe from every corner of the world, at some point, imagine if all of that negative energy got released at the same time in the same space, what it could conjure.
Mm.
And the fact is that we know that words do conjure things. Words. I mean, think
Yes.
about think about when we was drumming music. When we have songs, those lyrics mean something. Lyrics touch you. The words touch you. People have the ability to say something that makes you feel good or feel bad. Those vibrations, that's this power in language. I think it's a meme that's like all over the place now, that abracadabra is really Hebrew. What yeah.
Abracadabra, yeah.
Yeah, I am what I speak, or something, that I
But
do what I
I is to create or to
mean.
make.
Right. I
Yes.
create what I speak. Right. I create what I
Oh,
speak. That's what abracadabra means. I create what I speak. So, and again, that goes back to Bereshit 1, the Most High literally creating as He spoke. He
right.
brought these things into being simply by speaking it. So to say, Mayana Amuna, you guys are going too deep. So what if I say, that's my feces, or that's horror, the feces. You know what I mean. And like the brother said, it's liberating to not have to count every word, and be overly conscious of everything. And maybe I just want to be angry in the moment, and say something that expresses anger. But I wonder, and I submit for consideration, that maybe that's not what's liberating. We reach for these words not because it's liberating, but because it's something that has been given to us. If we had other words, and those words were in rotation, and those are the words we were familiar with, then wouldn't we find liberation in using those words, because those are the
This is
words we
true.
have?
This
Maybe
is true.
use those words because we have them, or we've seen them, and they're
That's
easy to get to, right? All you
right.
have to do is learn other words. Like, I still think, like, when I watched, there's a scene in Coming to America, when the McDonald's is being
Right.
robbed at
Right.
Arsenio Hall.
Right.
To
Right.
this day, being called a diseased rhinoceros is everything. That is everything to me. The way the way Africans dress you down, it is serious. They don't have to use
Yeah.
no other
No, they
words.
don't. Yeah, actually, they don't. Like you a humpback turtle who crosses the road. I'll be like, what did you just say? Like what? When the baboon climbs the monkey, you're like, what did you? Yeah, they definitely have a way. I would
Yes,
I would say that, and for someone who is very expressive, as you can tell, I would agree to you use words that you have access to. Like I, in my own little mind, make up words, right? and and so definitely you have children who drive you to the brink. You know what I mean? And
yes,
I make up these that makes them stop and be like, "What did you just say?" You know what I'm saying? I'm
yes.
not cursing at them. The word literally. I'm trying to think of one right now. Uh, no, oh, I'll be like, I can't even remember right now. Now I'm trying to remember them and I can't even remember. Like if I'm shocked or surprised, I'll be like, I can't even remember. Now that's wild.
No,
That's
but
wild. If it comes to my mind again, see, I'm not upset, but if it comes to my mind, but I'll make words that may be the name of foods, or
no,
I
but
promise you, it'll be like something crazy, and they'll be like, "Mommy, you bug it out." But that
no,
energy that you're
even
looking to release doesn't hurt them. It doesn't hurt you. You know what I'm saying? In that respect, as opposed to, which I don't agree with, where people curse their children, or do these type of things in front of your children. Like that to me is like a no go. You know what I mean? Because they're going to pick up what you show them. Um,
No, but
So yeah, basically, go ahead.
all these other words. I mean, I was just trying to. I wanted to remind you. Remember how tickled we were with mollycoddle and milksop,
Oh
and
yeah, that word was everything. That was my word for like 2 weeks straight.
we were tickled. We were calling people milksop every chance we got.
But body coddle, right? And that's the thing. I because some people like new words or new things and others don't. Like, dictionary.com has the new word of the week, and it'll be like dig up some older word that, you know what I mean, could express whatever it is that you have to say. Yeah, I think I wrote mollycoddle like 3 times in an essay. I think I made a Facebook post on it. You know what I mean? There's just different ways that we can begin to exercise. Of course, words have different range of feelings of emotion, but the ones that we're choosing, and I think I just remembered one of the origin stories of
F you.
the FU is, according to one legend, is it would be written. Um, it's an acronym for fornication under consent of king. And the thought
That's
is
right.
that, remember that one? Is the thought is that only the king can give you permission to fornicate. This is
Right.
wild, right? And so if someone was fornicating, they would put this on the door. And in short form, it was read FU. You understand what I'm saying? And so that
Yeah.
is one of the origin stories of that. So it is connected to this level of being debased, not being in covenant, you see what I'm saying?
Right.
And being real animalistic in your exchange. And so if it's something that the way that people use it too, even these children nowadays, I mean, like, how did that make sense? You know,
Right.
it doesn't make sense. People make up. I saw this video, the lady with the scandal, Aunt Becky, with the
Oh
college
yeah, yeah, yeah,
scandal.
yeah.
Okay, so today I'm just passing by and seeing them have a video of the daughter teaching the mother slang, teaching Aunt Becky slang. And she's like, okay, now this word is thought, right? And then she's like, thought, like a thought, you know what I'm saying? And so these things have to be introduced. She had no idea. And then even what the little girl was saying about thought, I thought that's not what thought meant or thought meant. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But people, my point is that they make up words and now thought is actually a thing. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? A skeezer. What was a skeezer before we heard about what a skeezer was? You know what I mean?
Right.
But who uses skeezer anymore? Skeezers are the less vulgar uh type words. I don't even think I can look up skeezer. Hold on, let me look up Urban Dictionary. They don't even use skeezer anymore. But anywho, we're gonna wind down a little bit. This has been a very light. I mean, it's a serious conversation, but also lighthearted.
You
So I
know what? I
definitely
was I went to look it up just to look at the etymology and of
of
this
what
word.
skeezer?
No, of
Oh,
no of the F word. And so, although it's classified as vulgar slang, it says that it has a Germanic, is that it's German or Germanic in origin, and that it is from the Dutch dialect Fukelen, or possibly Indo-European root meaning to strike or to fist
so
something.
back to what you said. It's very violent. It's very
Hey,
void of any Ralph Transvet sensitivity. You know what I'm saying? It is it's definitely that detachment, you know what I mean?
my
From
goodness.
the person. And just now you're just going for you. And isn't that where we are today?
Oh my goodness. You know, as much as I dislike Wikipedia because it's so uh,
Wikipedia is
pedestrian,
the bomb system, man. You better start hating on it.
I know, it's so pedestrian, but I know,
You better
because
not. Did you just call Wikipedia crude in speech?
I call it pedestrian.
Did you just do the poll on Wikipedia?
Yes, it's rude. Yes, but except for
It's rude.
sometimes,
It's
I
rude
mean,
in speech.
if I click on it and it has a decent list of references, then that's the only time I really care. But so and this one actually does have a decent list of references. I think I'm gonna check out some of these references actually now that I'm looking at it. But the statement here is that it's I don't know. Apparently, it's considered to have first attested around 1475. That it has derivatives. What I find interesting about some of these these words is the fact is what Wikipedia is pointing out here, that it can be used as a noun, a verb, an adjective, an interjection, and an
That's
adverb.
saying everything. That thing is the multi-purpose word if I ever seen one.
That one and feces. I think that's another kind of way that we understand. I guess maybe if there's freedom in anything, is that it has no grammar rules, right?
Mm,
It's not really being Salika for that. I'm getting like it's a very long day, so
mm.
the Hebrew community has me on a call, and I'm getting all the notifications of all the things I need to be doing. Um, but oh, you know what? Speaking of the Hebrew community, shameless plug.
Nah,
Amuna,
nah, go ahead, sis.
on Sunday, we're going to have a summit. It's probably like if not the first Hebrew summit of its kind, it's definitely the first in a very long time of its kind. And the idea here is that we're gathering all of the leaders in the community. Anyone who has an investment, by leader I mean anyone who has an investment in the safety of our families in terms of the prevention and intervention of domestic violence. And so there's a summit that we're having. It's being held in Bronx, New York, and it's being held on Sunday. It's an all-day training, and it's not just a training because I don't. A lot of people are asking about it. It's not a counseling session. It's not a lecture series. It is an interactive discussion space. There will be some activities and some exercises and an entire toolkit because the objective here is to basically have a strategy and planning session to create and develop sustainable and enforceable, centralized policies on
Mm,
how to really address the instances of domestic or intimate partner violence in our community. So it's the time to talk about it has really passed a very long time ago. And yes, we can continue to have discussions. Discussions are important. Discussions are healthy. But what we need are policies, and they have to be centralized policies that a group of people all kind of agree to. It has to be a communal effort. So what we have done is we have worked to reach out to, I mean, a special effort to get men in the room. Because as I have told everybody everywhere that I have gone and met with in person, is that I can easily fill a room with women. Women are already on board. Women are already saying this is a problem. Women are ready to say this has to end. um the men not so much. The men are if they're having these conversations, they're not having it with us. If they're having these conversations, none of these things are being pushed towards policy. None of these things are being pushed towards having a type of legislation now. So I have invited leaders from ISUPK, like Tazariak is already on record as having accepted the invitation. He'll be there. Zabak, I spoke with him. He'll be there, or representatives from their groups will be there. So we have these type of heavy hitters in the room saying, you know, there's a problem here, and we're not going to talk about it. And when I say I need strategy and policy and planning, the men understand that that's where they're needed because we can
right.
create. I mean, the fact is that women can come and have like the best ideas ever. If the men are not going to put authority behind it and push it, it's not going to go anywhere. It'll fall flat on the floor. Like we can bring this all to the table. If no one is going to enforce it, if the men are not going to be behind it, it's not going to go anywhere. Let's just be really honest about that. So
And also because they're integral part in the discussion and the the issue, right? If it's intimate partner domestic violence, then you know what I'm saying?
right,
But then it might be like, oh, y'all about to talk about me. You know what I'm saying? Or
right,
talk about brothers and then want me to do something about it. So there's a accountability there and a responsibility for the men to step up and actually when something unfortunately like this does happen, that you have to, like you said, implement these policies that you've agreed upon.
right,
Right.
exactly.
So,
Right.
ooh,
We
scary
have
stuff.
we got to. I mean, I've gone to Knesset, so we had this go out at Beit Elohim, Beit Shalom. I believe that an invitation was sent out to Shema. So we're having all of the men come in and together decide that this is a community problem. This is beyond
Mhm.
doctrine. this is beyond, this is how I interpret, or this is the Hebrew I speak versus this is the Hebrew. It's not that. At this point, we're talking about the safety of our families, the
Right.
ability to argue tomorrow because we're still here. You understand? Like our families are in jeopardy. Like we have real life, real time. This is a real time, real life crisis, and we need everybody on deck. And like you said, that if this is something that's facing our families, the men are the other half
Mm-hmm.
of the
Mm-hmm.
adults in the relationship. So we're gonna have conversations about what abuse looks like. Who gets to be, who gets to be identified as an abuser, like, and who is it gets to be identified as the one being abused. Is it always the woman? When is it the man? What does abuse look like? What do we do about it? Because the first one is really going to be about let's identify it, and then it'll be about how we deal with it. So shameless plug. I'm not gonna take up the rest of the show.
Now you good,
Now,
sis. It's work in the field. It's not. It ain't plugged. It's all praise be to the Most High, the Creator, for us addressing these things. It's been a kind of lighthearted show, even though it seemed like we was coming for people. But this particular topic is one that needs to be on an ongoing basis discussed. In recent times, you'll have people who feel they don't have outlets, who go to all of these other outlets, I'll call them, to bring a one-sided story. But
right,
because it's sensationalized, because it's oh, we got something, you know what I'm saying? It's accepted. And then it's again blasted to the world.
right.
And there's no checks and balances, not to cover it, but to address these issues in the community. And so
I
as
mean,
you said, I agree, the men need to be on board. Brother, what you finna do about this?
yeah. I
Like,
mean,
yeah, brother, what's your thoughts? Yeah, I mean,
you have brothers that say, "Why are you going to outside sources? Why are you talking about us to, what they might call Esau, and all these things?" But the fact is that we don't have a Beit Din. We don't have anybody who is really putting together policy, procedures, strategies, none of that. So let's start having a serious conversation about actually legislating. This is not acceptable in our community, and we're not going to allow it. But first we have to be very honest about what it looks like and how we're
right.
contributing to it, and then dismantle it. But
One of
again,
them,
like you said,
one
we
of
need
them
to
is
have
calling,
every
making videos calling the woman bees. I mean,
yeah, maybe
the call her a bee video. I mean, I don't know.
well,
Just throw that up on the table. So, what's your thoughts on the
okay.
call her a bee
Looking
video?
at
I'm just saying.
right, looking at this language, like the language we're talking about now, with the idea that abuse is only hitting, that has to be challenged and
Right,
then
correct.
accepted. Maybe some of this language that we're using and excusing
Abusive.
is you're right, is abuse, right? Maybe we need to stop excusing and misusing verses, and the fact that we misuse text to justify bad behavior. Maybe we need to look at that. So these conversations are going to happen once in March, once in May, and once in June. And yes, it will happen in New York City. We'll have one online in May also, and all of this is on the website, and we'll drop the link in the box. Again, not to take up so much time, you can check out a lot of this information. If you can't come to New York City and you still think this is an amazing or a worthwhile endeavor, and you want to support, then there's a link in that on the website on how to donate so that we can fund the next two sessions and get this all the way out. We have partnered with a new Harlem-based organization here who has offered their services for free. So all of these discussions are 100% Hebraic. There's nothing secular involved in it other than we have access now to professionals who are donating their services to us, but they're not crafting the any of the modules, and they're not the ones who are moving these conversations. All of these things are 100% Hebraic. But if you want to help us out, if you want to fund it, Emuna has been incredibly generous. She's also listed as one of our sponsors. If you want to sponsor, you can send your donation and we will list your business on the sponsor link so that traffic is brought to your businesses. If you want to donate just as a member of the community, or even if you're not part of our community and you're listening to the show and you're saying, you know what, I really think that it's a good idea for that community, for the Israelite community, to eradicate domestic violence, because that kind of trickles into the overall melanated community or people of color and the like, and you just want to support the fact that it's an important initiative, you also can be listed as a donor. So anything, is amazing and appreciated. Um, and we will list you on the site if you request that. There are emails you can contact me, find out more information, and the like. And so, in advance, I want to thank anyone who is thinking about and will in the future help to donate. Again, if you can't do anything for the one that's coming up this Sunday, again, there will be two more sessions. So your donation is appreciated. Don't worry about it happening after March. We will still need money to fund the May and June sessions. There will be one session online that will just cover like basic things. And if you don't live in New York, but you do want to hear about some of the ways that we're crafting policies and strategies and learn a little bit more about intimate partner and domestic violence, that online training may be for you. So, again, I'll put the link in the box so it's available to everybody. And most of your questions can probably be answered there, but you can always reach out to me.
All right, all right, all right. See, build things, y'all. Build things, build things. Thank everybody for tuning in. I said we wasn't gonna stay long. I guess it's the old radio host in me. Be like, we ain't gonna stay long. Right all the way through the 10 o'clock hour. Hold on 1 second. How you just open my door and then don't close? You know what I'm saying? Ah. Yeah. So with that said, I guess I'll read this last here. No, no. Well, I'll read this last scripture here. Hopefully, we gave you something to think about, something definitely important when we're like, what's wrong with us, Most High? We might need to go ahead and check our heart condition. So, Proverbs
Mm.
15:1, a gentle answer turneth away wrath, but my father likes to say, he likes the KJV, but grievous words stir up anger. Here it says harsh words. That's his favorite script. A soft answer. And I think KJV actually says a soft answer turn away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. The tongue of the wise adorns knowledge, but the mouth of the fool gushes
Mm.
folly. So
Mm.
we have to. I did a series a long time ago on an old school website I had, and I'm like, oh man, where did all that stuff go? But I did a whole series. As you could tell, I kind of vibe with Proverbs. But I did a whole series called Am I a Fool? Right? And went
Mm.
through all of the spaces in which the text gives you the behaviors of a fool. And so in order to determine what do you do from there, you first have to acknowledge whether or not the behavior that we're exhibiting is foolish according to the text. Right. And
Right.
so I went through all of them. It was very laborsome, but at the end of the day, you have this full checklist. You know how you do the little stuff on the computer, you do the little quiz, and they'll be like, "Ooh, I'm such and such." Well, it's kind of like that where we quiz. Do I pop off at the mouth? Do I get angry really quickly? Do I all of the things that Solomon says in the statement? You make it into a question, and then you ask yourself,
Mm.
and then you'll be able to say, okay, you know what? I might that website they just took my stuff, and I would have to do it all again, and I got a lot of stuff going on. But so I'm just gonna go ahead and pass it over to you guys. And just look at this type of stuff and see whether or not what side you fall on. And I'll just give a hint. This world gives you credence and credit for doing foolishness. When your
Mm.
clap back is strong, ooh, don't mess with that person. You know what I'm saying? But in the eyes of scripture, it might be, yeah, your clap back, that was kind of foolish. Like, why did you do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Why did you do that in that way? You know what I'm saying? It says soft answer turn away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. You could have still addressed it, but not necessarily in that way. And then
Right.
there are other times where you do turn up, but you turn up what some people call righteous indignation. Nah, sis, that was righteous indignation. Like, how you got righteous indignation every day? You know what I'm saying? Like, this righteous indignation all over the place. As soon as you wake up, righteous indignation. Come on now. I think you only got about one time or two times to pull that per week. You know what I mean?
That's
But
right.
uh,
That's
you
true.
know, so I want to thank everybody for tuning in. This has been, again, as Flatbox said, last week it was heavy. It definitely was heavy, and this week was a little bit lighter, even though the content is still serious. As we're saying, this can lead to abuse if people do it outside. and intimate partner spaces, chances are they'll do it inside. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Chances are they will manipulate partners into doing lewd things, and so that they can meet people's members. And then somebody might say that that's not lewd. You know what I mean? I've heard it and seen it that, oh, the marriage bed is undefiled. We had that conversation before, but maybe
Yeah.
we have to come back and talk about what is lewd. Like, if we are not getting serious, if we don't like our condition, I'll leave it at this. If we don't like our condition, and we look back and say, man, our foreparents knew this for a minute, but we still here. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You gotta start checking everything. Like, you done went to the mechanic, you done moved the spark plugs, you done did all this stuff, and your car is still not starting. You better start troubleshooting. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And so you're like, wow, what's going on that it looks like it's getting worse? And when we
Right.
look at some of the things that we're practicing in private, like I said, that LPR situation, the Lord of the opening, and how many men fell behind, I believe it was the Moabite women, with this deity that was doing sexually lewd and lascivious, or suggesting that the adherents be lewd and lascivious. We have to look at everything that the society says, ain't nothing wrong with that. You know what I'm saying? We have to
Right.
look at everything that we're doing. And I know it sounds prudish, but the reality is, one of the ways in which the people can be controlled is kind of like in the story of the in the Apocrypha, with the mother with the 6 children, the 6 sons. Remember that story?
Yeah.
And they wanted them to eat pork because they knew that if I can get you to eat pork, then essentially, I'm going to weaken your spiritual
You.
field,
Right.
right?
Right.
It's not just a physical thing when they get you to eat something unclean. It weakens you spiritually, your spiritual immune system.
It
So if
means
I
that I can get you. What we're doing there, I'm sorry to cut you off, sis. I apologize for that.
now go
What
ahead.
what we see here is the thought behind that is if I can get you to compromise in this space, I
Mm-hmm.
can get you to compromise in other spaces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, and that's kind of what we as a people, when we say things like, leaning towards what the world is saying is okay, we have to look at those things and saying, okay, again, it's talking about discipline. It's talking about governing the self. Yeah, you may feel good today, and that joint jack you up for another how many months or weeks or years, and you hollering, Most High, help me, deliver me. But
Right.
every opportunity that you get, you over there asking somebody to meet your member. That was for Mayana. I'm just saying. You know what I'm saying? So these are things we have to really consider. Does the sexual here's a what you call this is Mayana? Does the sexual habits of Israel determine their holiness?
mm.
Question. The Most
It,
I said, "Be ye holy only when you put your fringes and go outside." You know what I'm
mm-mm.
saying? Be ye holy only when nobody else can see you. Or is it be ye holy because the Most High, your power is holy? And what does that look like for real? Because when the Creator looked at Israel and was like, you look like a prostitute, and then you a bad prostitute
Yeah.
because
That's so funny in scripture.
yeah, the Most High says to the nation of Israel, not only is you a prostitute and you went out showing everybody your teats and exposing yourself, you a bad prostitute too.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, like, how you gonna? I don't even want to go there, but how you gonna be a bad prostitute?
Yeah.
Question. The Most High like, you don't even do it right. So Israel is just really awkward out in these spaces, and we really have to look at the use of our procreative tools, the proper use, the misuse, how it affects the next generation, meaning the children that we create in these spaces. There's a lot of people who say, I made a lot of babies off R. Kelly. Then you look at the babies and you be like, I could tell
Mm.
you made a lot of babies off R.
Oh,
Kelly.
fuck Kelly. Yeah.
You look like you made a lot of babies off R. Kelly. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, let me see your children real quick.
Mm.
So that energy of, that, and it doesn't mean you have to be a prude. Our foreparents they had love for one another. Yitzchak was jesting with his wife. You know what I'm saying? That's how Pharaoh called him, like, oh, chill. Oh, that's what you're doing down there? So it's not
Right.
that you don't have this love and affection, but at what point does it get, or can it become perverse? Question. Question. Because I've seen some questionable questions. I'm like, that's a
Mm-hmm.
question? And then the response is, you can't tell someone what to do in their bed. And I'm like, you just look to transgress. I'm confused. So when we will come and talk about that, I don't know. I don't know. People, the last time we talked about that kind of get a little cursed out, but not really cursed out, but let's just say they didn't like it. Let's just say
We always getting cussed out though, sis.
that. It's all good as long as we allow for thought because we're talking about the elevation of the family and the relationship, right? And the
Right.
children. We're talking about spiritual elevation. So in the same way in which you guard your mouth, hopefully against consuming unclean products, is the same way in which we should guard our mind and our heart against consuming unclean information and
Mm.
unclean and entertaining unclean thoughts and actually acting out these unclean thoughts. There was a I know I said I'm gonna go. There was a throwback not documentary, evening news thing that I saw from the 60s or the 50s, I think. And the newscaster was very open with it by saying that the pornography industry was beginning to at that time flood the market, and he was talking about at that time that it was $1 billion industry, and he read perfectly, and it was a European newscaster. He read perfectly what would be the state of the people. I have to go back and find that video. He's like, if you allow yourselves to be inclined to this thought, this is the road you're going to end up on.
Wow.
And so for us to say that Israel have not, I'll find it and put it in and see what people think. To say that we have not coming out of wherever we're coming out of been affected by this, like these are the quote secret sins that are with people. So when people say, "Oh, just because you don't have on a head wrap and a skirt doesn't mean that you're not a garden tool," there's a level of truth to what we're bringing along and trying to cover up instead of dealing with.
Mm.
People may have uh, negative energy or sexual demons, or what I'm saying, like they may have been tampered with and now they're hiding it under the law. And when we hear all of these depraved acts, you're thinking, well, how can you do this? Because they came and covered it, and we pretended like a hallelujah made it went away.
Mm.
I'm just saying it's time for us to be real because there's too many stories out here.
That's right.
There's too many stories for it to just be all made up. You saying hallelujah doesn't mean that you're not a deviant if you're a deviant. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? It doesn't mean that you're not looking to bring that type of mentality and then hide it under the word. Anywho, any last words, Sister Mayana, before I get all the way turned up on this here topic? Wee. Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that.
That one. All right, then, y'all. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing under the palm. We still coming through. If you would like to be on the other side of this discussion, feel free to hit us up. I don't know. I'll be saying that, and people don't. I don't know. Y'all not trying to come on the other side of the discussion? Let me know. Sometimes I like to go on mute and eat my popcorn. But anyway, all right then, everybody. Everybody have a blessed night.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom.